digitaljamsessions.com. Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined by Richard from Stage 32 and David from Guerrilla Films. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello there.
Very, very briefly, if I could ask you to explain who you are and what you do. We'll start with Richard.
Sure. I am the founder and CEO of Stage 32, which is the world's largest platform for educating and connecting film creatives across the world. I'm also an actor, a producer, and a screenwriter myself, so I am someone that not only founded the network, but uses the network and have used it to my advantage business-wise as a creative. I started the site in 2011. It's global. We have over 500,000 people on the site now, 500,000 film, television, and theater creatives worldwide. And as I mentioned earlier, we offer education in the form of webinars and classes. We work with about 400 industry people worldwide to bring education to the masses as well as the networking. So Forbes called us LinkedIn meets Linda for people working in film, television, and theater. We like that because it gives the social media side of it and the educational side of it. And that's, the two main focuses of what we do.
Awesome. And David, would you like to explain to us more about Guerrilla Films?
Yes, I was an actor. I've been quite successful as an actor. And I became a producer, losing everything I'd earned as an actor. And I became, by accident rather than design, the first ever true independent producer to work with the BBC. And because I was in new territory, the BBC didn't know how it all worked. It's that part of the deal I did with the BBC to get my salary down to very little is that I was lumbered with these things called distribution rights, which I had no idea what that really meant. So over the next 15 or so years, I continued to produce more and more, get involved in distribution. And I became, by total accident, the first producer or distributor in the UK to use this newfangled thing called the internet to promote films. And back when I started in 95, went live in 96, we used to sell on VHS our films because that was all you could do. There was no such thing as broadband. And it predominantly, my sales were in America. Adobe Magazine had written an article about me saying I was the only person from the UK. And I had these titles, 2 Monty Python films that had never been distributed before. Something that the actor Anthony Hopkins had directed for me about Dylan Thomas. And then something else called James Herriot's in Yorkshire. James Herriot had been a writer. He was far bigger in America than he was in the UK. And what was very interesting in those early days is because I have the communist star as my logo, I've been called Guerrilla Films and nobody had heard of me. I thought, well, America in 1995, 96, they're going to be very wary of buying from a company in the UK. So what we used to do is that they would send us an order and we would ship out an NTSC VHS of that film. And when they received it, they would then send us a check or a bank transfer for the money. And in 2.5 years of doing that, we sold about, 4,000 or 5,000 units, and only 2 people ever paid. So in those early days, I thought the internet was this wonderful community of really honest people who didn't steal from you. And now my whole distribution business has collapsed because with online piracy, it's kind of destroyed the low-budget films that I've released. I've released about 100 films, and the majority have been by first-time filmmakers, and they're predominantly British and Irish productions. So I'm a great fan of the internet. I do think the internet is the way forward for all of us. It gets rid of all the middle people, but it's a double-edged sword.
Okay. So on the basis of the potential of a social audience, I'm curious because obviously Stage 32 is very much at the kind of the forefront as a LinkedIn for people in the entertainment industries. And one of the things that we find to be quite interesting at the moment is this notion of crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, Kickstarters, this idea of collaborative creativity. And I'm curious from your perspective whether or not you see Stage 32 as being somewhere where that collaborative creativity can really flourish.
Yeah, and just to clear up crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, because a lot of people do get them confused. Like, crowdfunding, obviously you're raising money from the crowd in support of a project or a business or a technological advancement of some sort. And crowdsourcing, in its most simplest terms, is identifying, engaging, and moving an audience. So in a DIY world that we live in now, for filmmakers, and with so many, let's say, actors taking their own material to make projects, screenwriters taking their own material and starting to film projects, and with so many outlets for streaming and distribution and all these things going on, it's more important than ever to have a presence, not only online, but a brand in a way that people understand who you are. There's so much, there's such a lower barrier of entry to get into the space, which means that more people want to come into the space, which means that there's more noise than ever. And how do you rise above that noise? Well, the way you rise above that noise is, if you're a filmmaker, let's say, and you want to create an audience for your film, you start doing it 3 to 6 months before you ever go into even pre-production. You start building an audience. You go out there, and like I said earlier, whether it's through social media or whether it's through networking or whether it's through, cold calling an organization that may be influential in helping promote what you're looking to put out there, you identify those people, you engage those people selflessly, hopefully, and then once you're ready to go, you move those people. You ask them to move for you. But it's vitally important in this day and age that people crowdsource, and that filmmakers crowdsource, and all film creatives crowdsource. And those who have done it well win the day. And we've seen it with some of these Sundance movies and, movies that had a built-in audience well before they ever, went into pre-production, so that when they did go into pre-production, people were already talking about it. And then once they were distributed, they had an audience already built in, ready to go, and a lot of buzz around their projects. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Within every crowdfunding campaign, there is an element of crowdsourcing, because, again, a lot of people, when they're starting a crowdfunding campaign, they just hit submit and they just go. They have an idea and they just go, and it's a huge mistake. They go by the if you build it, they will come model, and that never works. The idea with a crowdfunding campaign is, again, 3 to 6 months before you launch that campaign, you're out there building an audience for what you're going to do, engaging that audience, getting them involved in what you're doing, asking questions. What do they want to see? What do they think of this? Giving them a little bit of ownership in what you're doing. And then by the time that you launch that campaign, again, you have an army ready to move in support of you, not only financially, but to carry the message that this project is, now being crowdfunded, and come support it.
Absolutely. And one of the phrases that we hear an awful lot in relation to that is audience development. Mm-hmm. And it brings me to an interesting point that was actually discussed during Raindance this week, which was the difference between audience development for the individual project versus creating a brand for the individual filmmaker.
Yeah.
And I'm curious from your perspective, David, what your take is on that, whether you think there is a priority need for the filmmaker to establish their own personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important, because people, I'm obviously old school, people would go and see an Alfred Hitchcock film because it was Alfred Hitchcock. They wouldn't necessarily know what they were going to see. They just knew that he would deliver a certain type of film which they'd enjoyed before. Same with Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese and things. And I think you have a much better chance to do that now with social media than ever before. What used to happen in my day, it was up to whether the journalists thought that particular filmmaker was worth promoting, because that's essentially what they did when they wrote all their articles. And now the filmmaker can themselves control everything. And I always tell people to go and hunt out an American filmmaker called Gary Hustwit, who I would love to meet. I've never met him, but he's very clever at marketing himself and his brand. His first film was a film called Helvetica, which I can think of nothing more boring than a 90-minute film all about a typeface. But he's built up this extraordinary following with people who originally saw that through conventional media, whether it be in the cinema or on television, on cable or whatever. And now he is building a community of people who, obviously, whenever he brings out another film, they immediately want to watch it in whatever form. but he also uses them to fund his other films. He writes quite extensively. He has blogs and websites and things where you can follow him. And he's a very good example of the way I think that all filmmakers will be in the future, because if they don't engage with that, then they're not going to have a business. Because the old days where you could rely on a studio to really push your film and promote it, they're kind of long gone, because we can all come up with examples of really good films, but for whatever reason, factors have worked against them. You know, it may have to open on a sunny day, or it open, so people don't go to the cinema, which is what happens. Or there could be some news story that happens that stops people from then engaging with it. But by the filmmakers taking control of their lives, they are the masters of their own destiny. And I think that all these different sites offer wonderful opportunities for people to promote themselves. It's just, in many ways, you need to be better at social media, using it effectively, than you are at filmmaking, because the tables have turned.
Which brings me to an interesting question, an interesting point, which is that we're seeing this evolution of filmmaker. That filmmakers, it's no longer necessarily just about pure creation. It is about this understanding of the wider landscape, if you like, in terms of being able to market themselves and market their project, and not rely necessarily on a distributor to do that job for them. Because, as you rightly say, sometimes it is a case of, we accomplish the ideal dream of getting a distributor, and then they just they don't have the funds, they don't have the manpower, or they just don't feel that it's worth pushing that project at the time when it's most crucial. It's up to us as individual filmmakers to take possession of our content and really want to be the one to champion that in this new digital world that we live in. But the other question I have as well is this idea and this notion that actually, as filmmakers, we are now more personable with our audience than we perhaps were in the past. Traditionally it was very much we're on the set, we're doing our thing, and you as the audience can consume that on whichever distribution platform that might be, but you don't get to have a relationship with us. You don't get to interact with us during that process. And one of the things that we heard a lot about during this week here at Raindance was the idea of, for example, talent, communicating with the audience, during production. And I think there are some quite differing views on that. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, Richard.
Well, I think it's an instant access world, and I think you're very, very right. And I think that the points that David made were excellent from the standpoint that, you need to be much more than a filmmaker these days. You need to be a marketer. You need to be a communicator. You need to be aware of who you're trying to target. And you need to be very, 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 very much aware, I'm laughing as I'm saying this, of the fact that, it's called social media. A lot of people lose the social part of that you're not just a broadcaster, you're a communicator. People lose that concept all the time. So, one of the questions you asked previously about, is it the film or is it the filmmaker? A lot of people that are doing it for the first time, it really is the film in a way, because people don't know you as the filmmaker. So it's about the content, and it's about you. It's almost like you as a person more than you as a filmmaker, because you haven't been able to prove anything yet. You're not going to be able to prove it until you have the film made. So, a perfect example of this is I have a friend, his name's Gary. He's a filmmaker in LA. He actually started in New York, and he did some crowdsourcing for his first film, a short, and he raised about $5,000. He went to his family and friends, did all that. But what he really tried to cultivate early on was this connection with an audience. He said, look, this is the film I'm looking to make. This is what it's going to be about. Does this resonate with you? And I think it will resonate with you. Can you give me your feedback? And questions, when you ask questions, it's the great opener and the great equalizer, and it puts you on level ground with everybody, and the person feels at ease because they feel, again, that they're getting ownership. You have interest in them. So he went out and asked a lot of questions. And to make a very, very, very long story short, he created an audience for the film, and then he delivered on the film. But he not only delivered on the film, he was in constant contact with that audience during, it didn't end when he got done filming, or it didn't end after he raised the money.
Yeah.
He was in constant contact in post-production. He was sending pictures, while they were editing it. He was telling people things that were going on, hardships they were facing during the distribution process. This is what's happening. Here's where the film's going to screen. Please carry the message. And guess what happened? When he went to go make the next film, all those people, it was a different genre, totally different subject matter, but now they were fans of him. Mm-hmm. And he has done this 5 times now in 5 different genres with higher and higher budgets each time. He did 5,000 one. He's almost up to, I think the last one he did, I think it was 125,000.
Yeah.
And he's funded them all.
Yeah.
Because people will run through fire for you if you cultivate those relationships and you deliver and you don't just abandon them when the movie comes out.
You build the trust.
You build the trust and
Absolutely.
you keep the communication going. So I think it's vitally important for filmmakers to understand social media. I always say on Stage 32, I tell every creative that honing your craft is 50% of your job, and the other 50% is networking. Mm-hmm. And I'll include in networking if you have something to promote or you're putting a film together that's involved in that, like networking, communicating with your audience. Mm-hmm. But it really is 50% of your job to be out there, be visible, and to make those connections that matter, either with other creatives or with your potential audience.
Mm-hmm. And I think the one point that I would kind of add to what you're saying there is this the most common mistake for crowdfunding and Kickstarters, Indiegogos is people forget to inform their audience what's happened once they've raised those funds.
Oh, no doubt. They abandon,
yes.
and then it's like, we took your money,
mm-hmm.
take care.
See you later.
Yeah, you're not going to get them back. Sorry, David, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I'm absolutely agreeing. I mean, I learnt it all from the theatre in the West End. The commercial theatre in London has never been particularly economically viable, and it's always relied on angels to fund it, going way back since before the Second World War. And theatre producers are brilliant because investors are also their audience, and they get people to put in, relatively small sums of money, say like £250, £500, and they're obviously from people with some means. And those people do it because they like the fun of being involved with that theatre production. But they also go out and tell all their friends, I've invested in this play, why didn't you come along and see it with me? And all their friends pay to see it. And it's something that I've noticed in the last 35 years I've been producing, is how really bad filmmakers are, not only with keeping up with fans from past films, but also investors of past films. I met somebody who was fortunate enough to get this woman to invest £2 million into this film, and he treated her incredibly badly. And then when he needed money for his next film, she just said, "But you were so," and she's a very wealthy woman. And she said, "You were just so rude to me. You didn't bring me out to the set. You didn't woo me." And that's what the filmmaker of the future has to do. And I see a lot of people doing it, not from my generation, from the younger generation, is they've learned that how it's very important that, you treat all your people, whether they're funding sources or they're fans, you treat them with respect. And they love it to be involved with it. That is part of what they're getting involved for, because I've had a lot of investors over the time who have done rather dull jobs, and for them to get continual reports from me about what's happening, they feel part of something that they enjoy hearing about. And it's the same with fans. You just have to go to somewhere like Comic-Con and see how those fans have made those films successful. They have made careers. And that is incredibly important. And it's something that I cannot stress too much, is the building of the audience.
And if I could just add one thing to that, it's a perfect example. It's so well done. And I think, the idea of treating the audience with respect, again, I think the thing that people lose on online is they don't treat their online life or the persona online in the same way they would in a real world situation. So, you get people all the time that, our Stage 32 Twitter account, for example, has, 140,000 followers. People just see that number and immediately are, hey, take a look at my crowdfunding campaign. Hey, and I said, that's the equivalent of walking up to somebody in a room and just walking up to them blindly and saying, hey, give me money. Is that ever going to work? Of course it's not going to work. So why would you do it online? And with so many people, if you don't have the awareness to know that there are so many people online trying to do the same thing you're doing, and that you have to be better at it, and you have to be friendlier and more of a communicator and more aware of who you're trying to target and how you engage them, then you're just not going to win the day. Somebody else is going to win it. So I think that that's a big part of it too. And that comes back to what David was saying about respect and awareness and approach.
I think another word to throw in there as well is authenticity.
Authenticity.
And, being very transparent with the audience is also very important, I think.
No question.
But since Comic-Con, MCM London Comic-Con are a very good friend and partner of ours, and they have a show coming up in 2 weeks' time, we're going to do a quick plug for MCM London Comic-Con. If you're listening to this show before the 26th of October 2015, don't forget to go down to London XL on the 26th of October and check out London Comic-Con.
See, that was very engaging and very nice. Very authentic.
And now Comic-Con will remember that we like them.
Yes.
But guys, one of the things we always do on a digital jam session is we ask you to tell us what you think will be the most significant cultural change, technological innovation, or significant change in the landscape of your industry that you think will change things within the next 5 to 10 years. So I'll start by asking you that question, David.
I think that most distributors will go out of business, and the same with sales agents. I think that in the future, if a distributor or sales agent cannot offer you money for either production or an advance when you've made it, what's the point? Because as we touched upon earlier, the distributors are distracted by so many different projects, because if a film doesn't work, they've got to move on to the next film. And nobody sells a film better than the filmmakers. So I've already met with a number of investors who have been talking about funding filmmakers direct and getting them to do the distribution, giving them the money to do it on a global scale. So I think that producers, filmmakers, content providers are in control, and they will continue to be in control because they make what it is that people want to see. With my distributor's hat on, I can't see what I can do to provide it because I can't provide money. So what's my function?
Okay. And what about you, Richard?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think playing to David's point, I think that, the advancement of people understanding now that this is a global film community. We're starting to recognize film now as more global than Hollywood. And, by virtue of that, social media sites, niche social media sites, online distribution sites, which nobody has quite figured out yet, but I do feel like somebody will over the next 5 years. Well, I think we're going to see a rise in that. And I think what's going to end up happening, it's already starting to happen, is that filmmakers are going to realize that I can film in one place and have somebody halfway across the world edit it and have somebody on the other side of the world score it. And we're seeing more and more of that now. And what that does is not only give it a global feel, but it also creates sometimes a global audience for particular projects. This baby behind me clearly doesn't agree with my assessment. The second thing is, I think that, technology wise, I think the obvious one is virtual reality and how that's going to play, and Oculus Rift and everything. I already know quite a few filmmakers who are dabbling with it. Some of them quite almost like hate dabbling with it, because they don't want it. They're traditionalists and they don't want to see this, but they want to kind of figure out if they
understand they need to be there.
Well, or if they're being too cynical about it. And then, of course, I know some other filmmakers in LA that are really, really embracing it and, and lobbied Samsung and, give me, let me test. And they're more than willing to let them do that. So I've seen some test material with film, and it's pretty interesting stuff. Not my thing yet, but I think that it's going to be unavoidable and it's going to be upon us much quicker than I think we probably want to imagine. Probably going to go to bed one night and wake up and it'll be there. But that's what I think is coming up. Yep.
Okay. So first of all, I think I should probably mention that we are being hosted today by the lovely Mayfair Hotel in London on Stratton Street, hence the lovely background music and the occasional crying baby. So thank you so much for bearing with us and continuing to listen to the Digital Jam sessions. In the meantime, I will say this. We normally like to give our listeners a way to follow you, hound you, find out your every move.
Sure.
And we do this normally in the form of sharing a social media handle of choice. What would your social media handle of choice be, David?
I'm a great believer in Facebook. Facebook for me is, I was very reluctant to join it given the age I am, well into my 50s when I did. But I have found films that I partly financed through Facebook. I've found crews. I've introduced actors to directors. I find it the most wonderful tool. I know people use it a lot for their personal life, but I find in this business I can't differentiate between the two. My private life is my business life. I relax by watching films. Films are my hobby as well as my work. So, David Nicholas Wilkinson is my handle on Facebook, and I use it for blogging, I use it for giving advice, and I use it to introduce people. I mean, you mentioned earlier LinkedIn. I never know what the point of LinkedIn is. It's just a place to park your CV, but I found, for me, Facebook gives me so much.
Okay, wonderful. And Richard, I suspect I know the answer to this question as to your preferred social media.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll go outside. I mean, the obvious one is, if you sign up for Stage 32, you will have me on your wall immediately. You'll get a message from me, David. I hope you'll join. And it's like.
I've already joined.
Oh, cool. Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, so if you join Stage 32, you'll see me right on your wall, and feel free to. I respond to every post, every DM. It might take me a little while to get back to everybody, but my tech crew figured out the other day that I've made over 900,000 posts on stage. Crazy, because I do respond to everyone. But my outside of Stage 32, I am on the one that I prefer. I'm on a few. I am on LinkedIn, but more as a CEO than as a creative, because I don't find any use for it as creative. And my social media czar, we just hired a social media czar to handle all of our stuff. She just put me on Instagram as well. But my preferred one is Twitter, and I'm on there. My friends call me RB, so I'm on there as RB, letter R, letter B, walks into a bar, which probably tells you a little bit more than you need to know about me. So it's RB walks into a bar on Twitter.
Okay, and we'll make sure to add those details onto the notes for this session. Once again, I want to thank both of our wonderful guests for joining us today, and the Mayfair Hotel for hosting us. Thanks again for listening and joining us on this Digital Jam session. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review. Thanks again for joining us on this Digital Jam session. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you, and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk. DigitalJamSessions.com